a little time for a getaway. It's all good and better still. We can go crazy and you know we will.
Yes, that's a great video that my daughter took of our vacation to Moab, Utah. And Moab, Utah was a great place to see rocks. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, when rocks are broken in the process of weathering. So in class this year, we're talking about weathering, when rocks are broken, erosion, as those sediments move to a new location, and deposition, their final resting spot. Today, we're just going to talk about the first one, weathering. Are you ready for this? Let's go. The surface of our planet Earth changes, and today we're going to talk about one of the ways that it does, through the process of weathering rocks, in the process of soil formation. But what is weathering? Weathering is the breaking down of rock into smaller pieces that remain next to each other. Weathering forms sediments, so it makes smaller rocks. There are two types of weathering that we're going to discuss in this presentation. The first type is mechanical weathering. Mechanical weathering is the breaking down of rock without any change in the chemical composition of the rock. We sometimes call it physical weathering because we see a physical change or a physical force is tearing those rocks apart. Smaller pieces do not move to a new location but remain next to one another until erosion carries them away. So it's very important to remember that weathering breaks the rock. If it starts to move or travel somewhere, then we call it erosion. The first form of mechanical weathering we're going to talk about is ice wedging. Water enters the cracks in rocks and then freezes and expands about 10%. The ice strains the walls around the cracks and causes cracks to deepen and widen. When the ice thaws, water can flow further into the rock. Then we repeat the cycle. Freeze, thaw, freeze, thaw, freeze, thaw. Over time, the rock breaks up along the cracks into angular pieces. You want to see what that looks like? Here it is. Oh, that's pretty cool. And those cracks have gotten pretty big. Over time, they're going to get bigger and bigger. Another type of mechanical weathering we are going to discuss is exfoliation. Rocks form deep in the earth or under a huge amount of pressure. When erosion removes the overlying rock, the rock that's on top of it, the once buried rocks are exposed and the pressure on them is released. The outer rock parts tend to expand. The expansion sets up stresses which cause fractures to form parallel to the rock surface. Over time, sheets of rock break away from the exposed rocks along those fractures. You want to see what it looks like? Here it is. Exfoliation, a process of weathering rocks. I'm pretty stoked about that one. Another type of mechanical weathering, our first type of weathering, is thermal. Thermal weathering results from expansion or contraction of rock caused by extreme changes in temperature. We see this in deserts a lot because it's very, very hot during the day and then it cools off at night. Different minerals expand and contract at different rates, causing the rocks to split. The outer layers peel off into thin sheets. Here's an example of thermal weathering. Yes, it is due to heat, but I don't think we're talking about hot sauce. Another mechanical weathering we're going to discuss is biotic. Biotic weathering is caused by, you guessed it, living organisms. Most often, we see this in the form of vegetation. Plant roots are the big cause of the problem. They act as a wedge, widening and extending the cracks in rocks. Digging animals can also cause weathering. So an example of biotic weathering, here we see the tree roots. What did they say about the dogs, though? I think I might know an animal who's done some digging. Dixie?
It wasn't me, Mom.
Louie?
I don't dig holes.
Sam.
It was me, Mom.
The second type of weathering. So first we discussed mechanical weathering. The second type of weathering is chemical weathering. That's the breaking down of rock into smaller pieces because of chemical changes within the rock. Rock reacts with water, gases, and solutions, which may be acidic, and these reactions will add or remove elements from minerals. Chemical reactions break down the bonds holding those rocks together, causing them to fall apart. Let's see what that looks like. Chemical weathering. Oxidation is the first one we're going to talk about. Oxidation takes place when oxygen combines with other elements in rocks to form new types of rock. These new substances are usually much softer and thus easier for other forces to break them apart. A reddish-brown coloration on the surface is called rusting. I think we've seen this before. This rock is going through the process of oxidation. Another example of chemical weathering is hydrolysis. Hydrolysis is the weathering reaction that occurs when water and chemical compounds in a rock meet. This results in the decomposition of the rock surface by forming new compounds. Most common reaction is the hydrolysis of feldspars producing clay. Here's an example of hydrolysis. Another example of chemical weathering is carbonation. Carbonation takes place when carbon dioxide reacts with water or rain, forming a weak carbonic acid. This is the same acid found in soda. The acid is too weak to harm plants and animals, but slowly causes feldspars and limestone to decompose. The substances in rocks form new types of softer substances. Here's an example of carbonation. Another example of chemical weathering is biotic acid. Lichens and similar plants live on the surfaces of rocks. Plants lower the local pH to make it more acidic, and that can create some problems. Their roots give off a chemical that dissolves rocks and minerals. Here's an example of what chemical weathering biotic looks like. So what did we learn today? I'm on my soapbox now. We learned about the process of weathering rocks in the process of soil formation. We learned that there are two types of weathering: mechanical weathering, sometimes called physical weathering, and chemical weathering. I want you to go outside and see what types of weathering you can find where you live. And I think I'll go back to Moab.
Yeah, yeah. Born in the sun.